Right, are we good? Are we live? I think we are. Hello and welcome back to the Women's Football Chat. We're back with our weekend roundup. It's been a long hiatus over the winter break. We are back now to talk about all the WSL action from this weekend's games. Game week 12 gave us a lot of drama. We had a draw in that battle for third place in the league. We had a relegation scrap, really, as Liverpool took on London City. And we had some big games as well at the top as Chelsea and Man City claimed routine wins. But we're going to kick off today's show. Well, actually, first, Harry, did you enjoy the weekend?
Yeah, it was a good weekend. I thought there were some aspects that certainly could have been better. I think the theme of this show is going to be inclinicality across the whole game week. 11 goals scored in the 6 games, and 5 of them
a record low.
I'll say 5 of them were by Chelsea, so that's suddenly 6 goals in 5 games. And I have to say, you watch back those games, and I think the majority of them got a lot more goals than they did. 2-0 in there as well. So yeah, I think it's probably one of the lowest scoring game weeks we've seen in a very, very long time, which was quite a disappointing way to kind of bounce back from the winter break in style. And the big second half of the season didn't really kick off in potentially the way we expected it to.
But I think it spoke a lot about obviously that rustiness coming back from the winter break, but also how close a lot of those fixtures are. We had obviously Aston Villa, Brighton both fighting away in mid-table. United and Arsenal, 2 sides very close in that battle for European football. London City under new management against a Liverpool side who desperately need to pick up some points. These were always going to be quite close games. Add to that the fact that teams are a little bit rusty. There's some new players bedding in. I think it just all combined to have that sort of feel. Welcome to the stream, by the way. Rob for the first time listener. Love that. Welcome to the show. Phil saying evening all, and Locus as well. Right, let's get into our first game then. It's not often that we kick off the top of the show with a 0-0, but a first time for everything, and it's Arsenal 0-0 Manchester United. Harry, we came into this weekend with a lot of anticipation for this game. You weren't on the live stream, but you have since gone back and watched it. Not the most electric game of football, not the most electric result, but still an enjoyable watch.
Yeah, it was still okay. I think obviously compared to the battles that we've seen United and Arsenal have over the last couple of years, I think the last 3 fixtures we saw a 4-2 last season, we've seen a 2-2, we've seen a lot of goals in this fixture, and everyone went into this thing, I tell you what, this could be another classic, and I think it kind of let everyone down in that aspect. But still, as you say, a pretty decent game, and a game that has massive consequences on the table. But when these big sides meet, you expect them to be close games, but you don't want to see a 0-0. You want to see both sides have a go at each other, and United didn't really have a go, and Arsenal didn't really know how to have a go. So yeah, it was one of those where I think it felt there was a point in the game where it felt destined for 0-0, and obviously there was the red card was a big game changer, but you thought that might spice things up, but it didn't. But yeah, I thought a bit of a game that promised a lot more than the 0-0 shows.
Well, it makes it a couple of 0-0s for this fixture this season, because obviously the reverse fixture was 0-0 earlier in the campaign. It was a game where Arsenal really stifled in attack, and it's been a theme of their campaign this season. Obviously, the reverse fixture, as I say, was 0-0. We saw a similar case in the game against Tottenham, that game being 0-0 again. But statistically interesting, it's the first WSL home fixture under Renée Slegers that Arsenal failed to score a goal. And obviously, remember back to last season, they had a run between February right until the end of the campaign where they scored 2 goals, at least 2 goals, in every WSL match. So to go from that to what we've seen this season, where it has looked quite stagnant, and actually I've got a video coming later this week about what's going wrong for Arsenal's attack that goes into a little bit more tactical detail, but they have had a huge problem in attack. The stats behind this game, 2.80 XG, sounds like quite a decent tally, but they created just 1 chance of 0.34. That was Olivia Smith in the first half. Outside of that, there wasn't much above 0.2. So while they took a lot of shots in this game, and they did 25 shots, they only put 6 shots on target, and they only created 3 big chances. So it's very wasteful from Arsenal, but they also didn't really create anything. It's a weird paradox in that sense.
Yeah, it's kind of that debate between volume and quality. A lot of teams manage to find a way through because they just have a barrage of shots, and eventually one of them goes in the goal. Some teams will have a handful of shots, but they're all really good, high quality chances, and they score them all. So you kind of have that balance, but Arsenal don't seem to have either of that at the moment. They're creating quite a volume, but it's not big enough or as creative as it should be to eventually put on the back of the net. And obviously they're not one of those sides that are clinical, from just a handful of chances. So yeah, they're kind of sat in the middle of those 2 brackets, which puts you in the position where you just don't score goals. So yeah it's a difficult one for them, but as you say, you either have to be clinical or creative, and if you're neither of those things in a football match, then you're simply going to find it very, very difficult to find the back of the net.
Yeah, in this game as a whole, though, neither of these sides now beating anyone in the top half. That's got to be a concern for both of these teams because, I mean, obviously Arsenal had the draw with Chelsea. Obviously, they lost to Manchester City. They've now drawn with Manchester United on 2 occasions and drawn with Tottenham. Manchester United drew with Chelsea, lost to City, and had a draw with Tottenham as well. And obviously, the draw with Arsenal on both occasions. So similar records against the top half of the table. And obviously, Arsenal drew with Villa and United lost to Villa. But that's got to be a concern. Two sides who've been very strong against weaker opponents, but as proven by the league and in the Champions League, two sides that when they come up against top opposition have come undone.
Yeah, I think it sits differently for both sides. For Arsenal, it is a case of, they have had their games against top sides have been really weird. Obviously, the Chelsea one at the Emirates was a bit of a mess in that whole second half. The Bayern Munich one in the Champions League, as you say, they were leading in that and completely threw it away. So Arsenal, they kind of sit on a really weird one for me, and I can't quite figure out where they do go wrong in those kind of big matches, because theirs have been a bit more of an anomaly. So the ones that, even the City game they lost was an absolute humdinger at the Joey this season. United is the way Skinner's set up. Mark Skinner has played defensive and played reserved in every single game against anyone of any quality this season, which I think is, I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it shows though where he knows his squad and their quality sit, because he believes the only way to get a result against the best sides in the league is to sit deep and not, it's defensive football. It's not necessarily, it's not that far away from what they usually do, but it's just more defensive, and obviously that's not them playing their full version of their own football, which, as I say, I think it shows that Mark Skinner understands that maybe United aren't quite there yet with the bigger sides in the league. But yeah, it's intriguing to see them set up that way. Of course, that defensive way of playing hasn't actually got them a win yet, which will be the disappointing factor. It's got them a couple of points, a couple of draws, but you don't win leagues by drawing to your title rivals. You win leagues by beating them. So yeah, I think that the way Skinner sets up again in the big games is going to put United on the back foot, because they want to play more defensive. I don't necessarily think it's wrong, but that's just how it is. And as I say, for Arsenal, well, yeah, they've had some really weird clashes, but none of them seem to fall in their favour, which suggests it's less about luck, and that there more is an underlying reason as to why that happens.
Absolutely. I think with United, it's very difficult to discuss whether they should or should not be defensive, because I think there's two very different sides to the argument. I think on one side, I completely understand why they're going defensive. It probably gives them the best chance of finishing third this season. And from a financial point of view, they need that Champions League football. From a competitions point of view, they want to be in the Champions League again next season. But on the other side, when do they stop being the underdogs? They've just signed Lea Schuler, Hannah Lundqvist. Looks like they're going to sign Ellen Vangerheim. They're three signings that any team in this league would be envious of. So when do they stop being the underdogs? When do they start going toe-to-toe with the top teams? And when do the excuses stop? Because I think United are a very good team. We've seen that in games this season. But if Skinner goes into every big match trying not to lose rather than trying to win, I understand that mentality, because they are fifth in the league. They are just trying to get into Champions League football. But there will be United fans who are very frustrated at the fact that they're not progressing quick enough. United have, since Skinner's taken charge, they've gone from a side who were newly into the WSL to being one of the top teams in the league. They've won, obviously, the Women's FA Cup in that time. They've gone into the Champions League for the first time in their history this season. But when do they take that next step? When do they win something major? Yes, they won the FA Cup in that season, but it took a bit of fortune in that semi-final game against Chelsea. When do they get to that point where they do just sort of take the harness off? When do they try and take on a big team? It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the second half of the season. Personally, I do think this draw helps from United more than it does Arsenal, because of Arsenal's fixture run over the next few games. I think it does make life very difficult for Arsenal, but I do think United could have gone for it. What I will say is that they had the red card. Without that, do they push a little bit more, Harry?
Potentially so, as you say. I think that I mentioned it a few moments ago that they got to a point in the game where it felt very close, and that red card came in, and I think it felt like that shut down any chance of United getting something from the game, and it massively advantaged Arsenal. But yeah, I think that there was still a very decent amount of time to be played after the red card, and United could have very easily made something happen with that. Obviously, they've brought on the subs like the likes of Schuler, Awujo had just come on. So I think Skinner will be frustrated with Riviere for getting sent off, because it kind of shot them in the foot in terms of trying to win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. A good point, by the way, from a different Geordie in the live chat, saying United had the better chances. Not overall, but the best chance and the biggest chance of the game was United's opportunity in the 6th minute, I want to say it was. Riley and Rolfo only denied a brilliant stop by Annika Borba, pushing it up onto the crossbar. Outside of that, they didn't create loads, but that was the best opportunity in the game, and Arsenal didn't create anything that had a better chance of going in than that did. So I can see the argument there. Phil said Steen needs to start. Russo's dropping deep for the ball and playing more hold up, so her and Marnham doesn't function properly. Yeah, I think that whole the front two doesn't really work with Alessia Russo, and the difficulty for Arsenal is now, does Slager change her whole tactical system to fit Russo in? Because at the moment they're just sort of fitting her into a role, or do they drop her? But they never want to drop Alessia Russo, so it's that difficulty of balancing a player who's so important to them, but also the ideal system that Slagers wants to use. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue to tussle with that problem throughout the rest of this season. That Riviere red card, though, Harry, do you think it was deserved? Obviously, 2 yellow cards. Only committed 2 fouls in this game, which obviously both the yellow cards. What do you think they were both yellow card decisions?
Yeah, I think so. I think there seems to be it is a harsh. I think it is of course it is always going to sound harsh when you get booked for, you commit 2 fouls, you get booked for them both, you get sent off. But I think when you look at the fouls in isolation, if you watch both those, they're both yellow card fouls. The first one it's late and she just catches the player, and the second one is not only again another late tackle, but to dive in like that on a yellow card is very, very silly. You always run the risk. Very uncharacteristic from a player like Riviere, who is doesn't usually give away any free kicks, usually very accurate and very good at turning the ball over. But B, again, with her experience, with her quality, you'd like to think she wouldn't go and leaving dangle a leg and leaving a stray leg out when you're already on a yellow card. It will feel a bit harsh, but at the end of both fouls were yellow cards. You can't put the referee in that position to for that second yellow. As soon as it's obviously a free kick, and if you don't, if the referee doesn't send her off there, then I think she could have counted herself very fortunate. So a bit harsh, but yeah, they were both yellow cards for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the first one was a little harsh to be a yellow, but I understand the reasoning there. I think the second one, once you're on a yellow card, the fault is on Riviere for going in like that. There's no need to, especially when Arsenal hadn't really done anything all game. Ford wasn't really going anywhere. Ford isn't great in central areas anyway. If she's running through on goal, fair enough, make that kind of tackle. But if she wasn't going anywhere, you make a fairly rash challenge, and it's really unnecessary from Riviere, and it absolutely cost the team in this game. A different Joy saying Arsenal didn't capitalise on the United red card. If United plays with 11 players on the pitch, I think United would have edged it. I do agree. I think bringing on Awujo and Schuler, it looked like United were going to become a little bit more transitional and try and make something of the game. That red card really killed that plan. Obviously, Awujo came back off, which I thought was the right decision. I know there'll be critics of that sort of player management from Skinner, but in terms of managing the game, that's kind of what they had to do. You can't take off Zigiotti or Miyazara in that position. They had to bring a right back on to play in that position. So it's unfortunate, but I think that probably was the right decision. But yeah, I think Arsenal never really committed, even once United were down to 10, they never really committed aggressively in attack. I think it's too laboured at times for Arsenal. I think it's too risk averse. Sometimes they've got to go for the game, but they don't tend to, and that is another problem with Arsenal's attack. But it does mean both sides are probably out the title race now. Gap to Man City is too large realistically. Who do you think this result benefited more?
Oh, so I think again,
Tottenham, obviously.
Yeah, Tottenham won in this match, but I think again it depends how you view it. For me, in terms of the way they went into the game, I think United will be the happier side. They went into it playing defensive. They've walked away with a draw and a clean sheet, and they're still in touching distance of the Champions League spaces. Yes, they've slipped to 5th, but I don't think that will bother them too much, because they know they can catch that back up when the likes of Tottenham and Arsenal face each. Tottenham and Arsenal draw again, for example, United are suddenly right back in that conversation. So yeah, I think that Of course, you want to have the position, always, and that is the thing that does benefit Arsenal right now. But for me, I think United, with the game plan they went into this match, they're probably the happier to come away with a point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a point between the two sides anyway. I think, yes, Arsenal have the league position, but their next fixtures are Chelsea away from home and Manchester City at the Emirates. And there may be a Leicester game in there as well, depending on how they schedule it after the Champions Cup. But I think, especially with the game against Manchester United again in the League Cup in a couple next midweek, and Aston Villa is not a nice time in the FA Cup. It's a tough run of fixtures, 2 tough league games in there as well. I think Arsenal will drop points to both, to one of, if not both, of Chelsea and City. And then that gives United that gap to make it back up. United in the next few weeks have much more easier fixtures, I believe. And that should take them into the top 3. I mean, it may just take Tottenham third. In fact, I think Tottenham are actually in the best position now to be, in 2 weeks' time, we may be talking about Tottenham sitting in the Champions League spot. So that is insane to think about, considering we're now into the second half of the season. But yeah, I think Tottenham are the real benefactors. I think United, they're in a position now where they can take advantage of Arsenal's tough run. And yeah, I think it will be good for United to get those wins under their belt, get back ahead of Arsenal, and it's going to put pressure on Arsenal then. Because yes, United have those tough fixtures to come, but I think that Arsenal, the mental factor of having to catch those points up, I think will be difficult for them to deal with. So it's going to be interesting to see if it gets that third spot. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Tottenham nicked it at this rate, given how these two sides have played this season. But yeah, I think United will be happier with the point than Arsenal will be. Let's get on then to our next game, which was much more comprehensive and much more interesting in front of goal to watch, and that is Chelsea 5-0 West Ham. Dominant, really, from the Blues. We've seen Chelsea operate with a new setup in recent weeks, moving away from that 3-2-4-1 type shape to what is more of a 3-2-3-2 type shape, which has been very interesting to watch for Chelsea. I think it gives Lauren James, obviously being back on the side and having that role in this new system, looks phenomenal. And I think Chelsea, they dominate the ball, dictate the tempo in this match. And what has been a bit of a problem for them this season has been in front of goal, but they looked much sharper at that sort of in that attacking thirds than they have in recent weeks.
Yeah, really good from Chelsea. That Liverpool game just for the winter break, I think, was an absolute massive one. That 9-1 victory to end the year has given them something to springboard off going into 2026. And yeah, they picked up where they left off in that match. West Ham couldn't really lay a finger on them, and yeah, Chelsea just it was one of those classic Chelsea performances where you just expected them to score every time they came forward, every time someone brought the ball forwards or they played through the West Ham lines. You just thought it was going to end in a goal, and the fact I think you can give Ginga Shemek some credit for some big saves, because if she hadn't done that, then maybe it would have been closer to that 9-1 against scoreline we saw against Liverpool. But yeah, really good from Chelsea. The pace was there, the movement was there, the effort was there. It was just everything you needed. It was a complete performance, and to keep the clean sheet as well will be important for Bon Pastor, because that's something that Chelsea haven't been able to do of late. So yeah, a clean sheet, an all-round very, very strong performance. It's the kind of level we expected from the reigning champions. It's the kind of level that has been a bit hit and miss this season, but yeah, in this 90 minutes, Chelsea were right on the money.
Yeah, I mean, a result against West Ham is nothing to write home about, but it's the manner of that result where they just completely outplayed West Ham. They couldn't touch the ball. They couldn't stop Chelsea whenever they wanted to come forwards. And they just looked so open defensively. And part of that, obviously, is West Ham looking quite poor throughout this season, not really having the defensive structure or discipline. But part of it was also Chelsea. And I think the way Chelsea pressed and forced the errors from West Ham, especially early in the game, I think was really strong. I think the way that Chelsea were able to move the ball wide, create those opportunities. I thought Carnereid and Thompson as a front two was unexpectedly brilliant. Yeah. They both sort of had that transitional threat, both good pressers as well. And Chelsea just looked really threatening every time they came forward with options, flanking either side. Someone running through the middle of the park. There's options everywhere. And that was so frightening, I think, for West Ham. We also saw the midfield given a little bit more licence to roam, knowing Kira Walsh in this game. And obviously, Walsh is usually a sort of conductor and that metronomic figure in the sort of heart of midfield, but instead we saw Nuskin and Cuthbert in there, and we saw a lot more energy in that midfield. Even when Potter and Captain came on, or especially when Potter and Captain came on, it felt like there was no sort of handbrake on, and everyone was given that license to get forward. And I just think that overloading in the attacking third just kept that pressure on, and West Ham couldn't handle it.
Yeah, it was always very difficult for West Ham to come into this and to try and keep up with Chelsea. But new manager, first game, and I thought that I mentioned pre-match. I rate Garino for trying to come in and play her way. Obviously, she had a bit of time to try and integrate her system. And they tried to come to Kings Meadow and play their football, and fair play to her. We've seen a lot of sides just put 11 players on the goal line and try and survive, and that feels like throwing in the towel sometimes. So they gave it a go. You could tell they clearly aren't ready and aren't set in playing that kind of football. And it just Chelsea obviously took full advantage of that. Of course, they're always going to. I think that Bombastor would have looked at this fixture being Garino's first and would have gone, we can try and capitalise on that. But West Ham is there's a lot of work to do there. But in this game, it felt like a lot, still missing a couple of players as well. Which wouldn't have helped, and I thought some players did all right and put in a decent performance. Others though just looked miles off the pace and really, really struggled to contain Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea ruthless in this game, as you've mentioned there. 4.11 XG created. That's a lot higher than what we've seen throughout this season. In fact, XG per game was 4th in the league coming into this game. They're shot up to 2nd now, which is much stronger, much where you'd want to be. Obviously, City's incredibly high at the moment. I think they're sitting around 2.20, which is ridiculous. Chelsea are now over 2.0. But 26 shots, 10 shots on target, 6 big chances created. There was a real ruthlessness in front of goal. We've seen throughout the season that Chelsea didn't really have that, and that's been so key throughout their dominant period in the WSL, where they take sides on and they don't let off. They just keep hammering them until they win, and that's what happened here, and that's why they won the game at 5-0. And I'm loving the new formation. I'll probably do a video looking at it in more detail, but it's something I theorised at the start of the season. Could we see Chelsea switch to this? It's something we're now seeing in practicality, and it does look quite good. We saw it used in the Wolfsburg game as well. We saw it used a bit in the Liverpool match. So they've found something that works now. The question will be, does that same setup work in those big matches when we get round to sort of the next few weeks? Arsenal, Manchester City at home and away. Manchester City as well in the League Cup. Away from home also. Champions League fixtures on the horizon, looking further ahead towards March. I think, we're looking at a Chelsea system now that it will be well tested over that period.
Yeah.
But I think it's a system that should be strong enough to be able to beat those top sides in the world, but also in the league. So, it's been interesting to watch, but I think Chelsea have found something that has worked out really well. Chelsea got to keep the pressure on City. Got to keep playing their own game. If they keep putting in performances like this, it will put pressure on Manchester City. It's going to be difficult. City have got a huge gap now, but this was definitely better. As for West Ham, they're in a bit of trouble, aren't they, Harry?
Yeah, I think they're really looking over their shoulders now. Liverpool's, we'll touch on in a moment, are starting to get themselves together and are starting to put points on the board, and now there's only one separating them, and you think that Rita Garino's got to get this side playing some good football very, very quickly. If you don't want to fall to the bottom. Once you get bottom, it can be very difficult to get off the bottom of the table. You can just ask Gareth Taylor, but I think that West Ham, it's one of those where, of course, they are looking over their shoulder and they are in trouble, but they've got to be optimistic because they've got Leicester and Everton above them are within touching distance, and very easily if West Ham beat Leicester in a couple of weekends time, and suddenly they can jump them, and it all looks very different. So it's one of those where if Garino can get them playing some good football, use the Newcastle game on Friday in the FA Cup isn't going to be easy, but it is against weaker opposition. It will be a nice opportunity to get to see how they can play that kind of football, and it will give them 90 minutes before that big game against Leicester. But West Ham.
If they don't beat Newcastle, there's got to be definitely some concern about them in the relegation fight, or at least if the performance is poor. If it's a good performance and Newcastle was better on the day, then sure, but that would be concerning if they lost to WSL to opposition.
Oh yeah, at that point suddenly they're in massive trouble, and then but they need to get the win on the board. They need something to get the morale up and get moving. I think I'd expect them to maybe bring in one or two more players before the Newcastle game, definitely before the Leicester game, and suddenly that might look a little bit different, because I look at this game, the individual mistakes, the individual quality was not there. Too many players made direct errors leading to goals, and suddenly without those this could be a 2 or 3-0 game. But there was some. I mean, Shakira Martinez, I think, passed to more Chelsea players than she did to West Ham players in this game. Shemmick cleared the ball into Lauren James for the third goal, and other players were just too many individual mistakes. If they can either cut those out or bring in better players in the next couple of weeks, then maybe the second half of the season looks a little bit nicer. But yeah, if they play like they did in this game all season, then they are going to be in a very, very difficult spot come the end of the campaign.
Yeah, well, speaking of West Ham additions, we thought we might see the first of their January arrivals in this game, but it wasn't to be. No, Estelle Cascarino she wanted to come onto the pitch, she was ready to go, but the fourth official said no. Harry, it was the earring that was the problem, wasn't it?
Yeah, I still cannot believe that we saw this at the top level. Any player should know at any level that you can't play play with any jewellery on you. At youth level and some levels you can get away with taping it up, and that's what West Ham and Cascarino tried doing this game, but that doesn't apply at the highest level. You can't just tape up a piece of jewellery. It still surprised me, the fact that she thought for some reason that they'd let her play in it.
Well,
it really
apparently it's only an English FA rule. It's not a UEFA or FIFA mandate.
Yeah, which I find absolutely bizarre. Bizarre that UEFA and FIFA don't have that, because why would you let people wear jewellery to play football?
I don't know. I personally wouldn't wear jewellery, but
no.
I definitely wouldn't wear it to play football. No. But I can see where the problem would be for Cascarino. And I know people have mentioned the fact she played in the WSL before, but that was 4 years ago and she made 2 appearances. So I don't think that really means, well, she must know all the rules then about jewellery. But yeah, a bit unfortunate. Would that have perhaps plugged the gap? We'll never know. Maybe they'd have only lost 3-0 if she had been allowed to be subbed on. Or it was 4-0, sorry, before she even came on, weren't it? So couldn't have been that. But yeah, I can't remember. Was it 3 or 4?
It was 4-0. It was 4-0.
Okay, fair enough. But yes, West Ham a little bit of trouble. Liverpool starting to click. Well, let's get on then to Liverpool, because that will be the reason West Ham are in a little bit of trouble, because this was a better performance from Liverpool. Yes, it wasn't perfect. Yes, they still only drew 0-0. And yeah, there's still a lot of work to do and possibly some more players to be signed in January. But this was a lot closer to what we wanted to see. But in front of goal, for both sides, an utterly drab affair.
Yeah, I feel like the neutral really lost out in this one. Both sides, as you say, will be content with a point in their circumstances. But wow, I have not seen a game this poor in front of goal for a very, very long time. Not a single shot on target. Is absolutely shocking. 90 minutes of football and neither side managed to hit anything within the goal frame. Just ridiculous. That's so poor.
Liverpool went close.
From both teams. Liverpool did go close, and they should have. Really, they should have. There were some obviously some blocks from London City, and there were some opportunities that they should have really hit the target from. Holland's one, towards the end of the game, where it just falls and blast it miles over the bar. Especially at that point when you haven't had a shot on, there hasn't been a shot on target. You just keep that one and go low and hard, and at least hit something. But yeah, really, really poor from both sides in front of goal. Liverpool created more but couldn't find the target. London City did absolutely nothing. So there is a bit of a difference in there, but they both combined to give us... it just didn't feel like we were ever going to get a goal in this game. It was just one of those contests. But as I say, at the end of the day, it's a clean sheet for both of them. That's something we haven't been able to say about either of these sides very often this season. So it's a bit of a weird situation, because a point is a point, a clean sheet's a clean sheet. But when you don't have a shot on target, surely you have to be disappointed somewhat with the performance.
Yeah, there'll be there'll be discussions. I think for London City, the attacking display was absolutely abhorrent. They had one shot in the game, and it was Nikita Parrish heading it directly up in the air. They didn't even it wasn't even close to going into the goal, because it wasn't really a shot. I don't know how it was classified as a shot. But outside of that, they did nothing in this game. They couldn't progress the ball. I want to start with Liverpool though, because this was a lot better from Liverpool in terms of their possessional play, in terms of their attacking play. I thought their wide combinations were really good. We're starting to see a bit of a relationship developing between Kapox and Bergstrom. I think that can be incredibly fruitful. We're starting to see a relationship on the other side between Holland and McLean. That was pushing forwards, and we saw Woodham overlapping as well, and that was a really nice combination. Lots of nice positional rotations. Holland coming inside, Woodham overlapping. And, you know, we saw Kapox and Bergstrom into twining as well at times where they swapped positions. And there was lots of really nice stuff. And I think, you know, Bergstrom looked really sharp. There just wasn't anyone to finish off the moves. And I know Mia Enderby isn't a striker, but she really struggled as the spearhead of that attack. Just got shrugged off the ball too easy. I feel for Enderby because her last game, we was talking about her in much more glowing terms. Her first ever WSL goal. And it looked like the confidence might be there. I think it really shut her down again to play in this kind of game in a role where she wasn't comfortable. Yeah. And she just got bullied by those defenders. I saw people online saying maybe they should have played Holland up front or Kapox up front. And while that may have its merits, it's easy to say that. But equally, you know, would they then not be able to get the ball forwards if they weren't playing those kind of players in deeper roles? So, yeah, if they had Olsen, I fully believe they'd have won this game and quite comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, it just shows the quality and the importance that Beta Olsen has had on this Liverpool side.
Even if they had Haug or Kiernan, just someone that would make a run in the box.
I was going to say, you looked at all the injured players sat in the stands and you just thought if any of those strikers were on the pitch right now, Liverpool would be able to find the back of the net. But yeah, if Olsen is out for any longer, then they need to address that ASAP. Or if any of the three strikers are out for any longer, they need to address that ASAP. I'm sure they'll probably get away.
You can't really sign a fourth striker though.
You can't, and to be fair, they'll probably get away with it against London Bees. I can't. Well, you know, I mean, if I'm London Bees, I'm fancying myself this weekend. But
and they have got Anna Josendal joining, who, while she's a left winger, I believe she can also play up front.
That is true. Because she has signed, doesn't she? So yeah, just put her up front.
Is she official yet?
Yes, yeah, it has been announced. So yeah, just put her up front. They go sorted. Yeah. They've done that. They just anyone, a presence up there. That is all. It felt like Liverpool had everything. It felt like the defence had come together. Everything had gone well, and they couldn't find the back of the net, and they never looked like losing. I think that's the way Gareth Taylor and Liverpool fans have got to look at it. It's for the first time this season they played in a game where they didn't look like losing it.
Yeah, I think they were the better side, comfortably the better side. I think, you know, this looked like a Arsenal-esque performance in the way they were able to just dictate the tempo, but they didn't quite penetrate the back line. The difference, obviously, is they didn't really take enough shots at all in this game. I think their XG was 0.4 or something along those lines. 7 shots, none on target. It's not good enough at all in attacking areas, and that has to be addressed. But ball progression was really nice. I really enjoyed Shimizu inverting and what that created in terms of sort of, the back two with Clark and Fisk, and a moment for Grace Fisk because she was phenomenal in this game. Blocked everything that came towards, was brilliant up against Nikita Paris. Paris didn't really get a look in this game. Her recovery pace to deal with players getting in behind London City, it nullified any threat that London City could even potentially have. So Fisk was phenomenal, probably the player of the match in this game for me. But you had Fisk and Clark as their centre-backs, you had Nagano, and then you had Shimizu inverting, and that created a platform from which they could play off, and it just meant they could recycle the ball so easily. It was just that penetration, that final ball that was lacking, that bit of creativity. Kapox was pulling into the pockets nicely, but there wasn't really that third-man run. There wasn't really that option in the penalty area. I think outside of that, though, it was really nice stuff from Liverpool. It's just unfortunate they couldn't quite find the goal in this game that would have made all the difference. But let's talk on London City, because they were awful. Absolutely. One of the worst performances in the league this season, I would say. Yes, we've seen some teams get decimated, but this had nothing. It wasn't like, they were trying to do something and they just kept getting opened up or something like that. They were just so awful. I know that they're adapting to Edemeister and stuff, but it was really poor. A few messages in the live chat. Alex saying, I think London City won't improve with the new manager. Lars saying, I think LCL manager change was a crazy thing to do. They didn't look good in the first half of the season, but they were getting points. It takes time for so many new players to gel, and I think that's absolutely true. And I get this is Maestro's first game, but he's been brought in to play a possession-based style of play, and so you think at a bare minimum we'd start to see some of that structure implemented. We'd start to see some of those principles brought into play, but they couldn't play through the Liverpool high press. There was so much sloppy passing. The amount of errors forced by Liverpool was ridiculous. And every time Liverpool came forwards, the only way they could stop them was committing fouls. 14 fouls in this game from London City. I think Gaiora was responsible for at least 5 or 6 of them. Yeah. No idea how she wasn't booked in this game, but they were awful, London City. Yeah, really, really poor. As you say, they're adjusting to the way that Maestro wants to play, but you have to judge this in a very different light to any other new manager. Rita Guarino, who we were just speaking about,
she is replacing Rayan Skinner, who has been, let's be honest, West Ham have been really, really poor to start the season under Skinner. So when Garino comes in and they do struggle, that's fine because that's what we've normally done. London City, they're currently sat mid-table in the WSL. You can't come in and play like that. It doesn't matter if it's your first game. You've got to. If you're replacing a manager that was doing really well, you don't really get as long of a grace period. Of course, they've still got a couple of weeks to work out what they'll do, but you're not going to get more than a month. You've probably got 1 or 2 more games until we've really got to sit here and go, this was a terrible idea. So the pressure is on now because there's also a difference between looking poor and looking just having nothing. There was absolutely nothing in this game. 1 shot in a game of football is not good enough at any level, let alone in the WSL.
Shot. I don't know how they put it a shot. That was terrible.
A half shot, and it was your only effort of the game. That is not good enough at any level. I don't care if you've walked into you're a new man. It doesn't matter. Even if you've been in there for 5 minutes, I'd still expect their side to have more than 1 shot. Yeah, miles off it. London City, very lucky that they walked into a Liverpool side who couldn't hit a Barnes or a Banjo. But yeah, there were a couple maybe promising signs down the left with with different combinations. But yeah,
Corrales just carried it brilliantly, and that was the only way they got forwards.
Yeah, but players like Paris dropped in to get deep, but Clark follows it all the way. Gayoro had a real shock at £2 million, by the way. Didn't look anywhere near that kind of any money. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, London City were miles off it in the game. How they've walked away with a clean sheet and a point, I really have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite bizarre, but Eder Maestro, despite playing just 1 game, is already the manager with the most pressure on him. Because, I think at the start of the season, there was no pressure on Poitiers. If they came in and survived, that was all the expectation was, despite the amount they spent. But now, because they were promoted side, but now you're in a position where they've spent the most in the league, they've sacked a manager who was getting results and got them into mid-table in their debut season. And so there is pressure on Eder Maestro because immediately there's going to be the comparison made. And if in 3 games' time they don't start to look better on the ball, there's going to be questions because that was the reason they cited for making that change was they wanted to change the style of play. But if the style of play doesn't work, it isn't, it doesn't look better, then they've done nothing. And that will be heavily criticised, I think, especially by fans and the media. So, yeah, I think there is a lot of pressure on Maestro. There is a lot of pressure now on London City. I don't think the squad is built for what he wants to do. I don't think the squad's built for what anyone wants to do. It's a random assortment of players who have who are high-profile players or decent prospects, and they're all on a lot of money, and it's got to work quite quickly. So there is pressure on the project right now. Yeah. There was no pressure to start the season, but they've piled it on by making these grandiose statements that they're going to be they're going to qualify for the Champions League, or we're going to bring in a manager and we're going to play beautiful tiki-taka football. You can't make those statements. There was no reason to make those statements and pile that pressure on. But 2, you can't make those statements and then play so poorly. Yeah. That's just going to reflect really badly on you. And so, London City are under pressure because they put themselves under pressure. Yeah. They've been given so much grace by the media this season. I mean, the co-commentator on after their games is their backup keeper. You can't get any more sort of grace from the media. But they've ramped the pressure up on themselves now. And now they've got to deliver. And this was a really poor showing for a team under that sort of pressure. So, yes, it's going to take time for Maestro to adjust. Yes, it can be a case of that short-term pain now where they're adjusting to what he wants to do for this sort of longer-term vision of a team that play better football. But this really wasn't a good start for what we expect to be a long Maestro reign at London City. Liverpool, though, vastly improved performance in this game. All that's missing now is that elusive first win. Yeah, they have to. They just need to get the 3 points. I think it's as simple as that now. The performances are there. They've got. I think that's their 4th draw of the season. This one, obviously, they're on 4 points. So it has to be. It just feels 3
like
points, aren't they?
That is. They're on 4 now, but maybe I'm wrong. But sure. I think that is just the one big dark cloud that's looming over them now. They've got to break that kind of mould that they haven't. They're still winless. They need to get a win over the line. They'll have some good opportunities to do it in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, that elusive first win when they get it is gonna be very, very good. But yeah, they need to do that soon because while they can keep playing well and keep getting points, but the longer that kind of cloud of being winless still looms over them, that's still going to be a bit of a dampener for the squad.
Yeah, 4 points. They are only a point behind West Ham now. Benjamin saying London City looks so poor. I think London Bees will show more of a threat to us on Sunday. Possibly. But yeah, no, I think Liverpool should be okay on Sunday. It'd be nice to see them give some different players an opportunity and win a game of football. I think that will be really important. The League Cup was a decent group stage campaign, but then the quarterfinal didn't exactly go to plan. That's the kind of competition now, the early stages of the FA Cup, where you can get that confidence through what should be quite comfortable victories. Equally, it can go the other way. I think we said it with West Ham. They lose to Newcastle. The pressure's on. With Liverpool, if they lose now to London Bees, that is a disastrous result, and that could definitely change things. So I think there is a bit of pressure on them this weekend. But if they can't rise that pressure against an opponent like London Bees, then we've got to ask bigger questions about the problem that Liverpool have. So. Yeah, I think London City were absolutely abysmal, and Liverpool should have ran with that. But yeah, I thought this was a much better performance. Anton says no fear of relegation, everyone will be all right. Yeah, but I could see Michel Kane sacking him again, changing the manager again in the summer, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I also I'd be careful. I don't know whether everyone will be all right. Again, it depends how everyone settles, but I look at those sides in the Championship right now, and I think Liverpool would probably be okay because they look like they're getting there. But you're telling me if someone like a Birmingham or Bristol City,
that was the London City, no?
Oh, okay.
Liverpool, to be fair, actually.
If it's for London City, then they'll be fine. Now that's why they've done it, is because they've got the points to survive. But I definitely think there is still a threat of relegation for sides like your Liverpools, your West Hams, and your Leicesters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those one-off games can be very difficult. Will be very difficult to navigate. We've never seen it before. We're entering new territory, really. But I think when you. Yes, both sides are competing for the same thing, but you've got a side who are coming off a season where they've been very successful and they're right at the top of their division against a team who have had a campaign where they finished bottom of the league.
Yeah.
In other leagues where you've got, and I think this will be the case, with the WSL going forwards, obviously with more relegation spots. But where you've got the case of, you've got two teams below them and then one team, that team that are in that sort of playoff relegation spot, they may not have had too bad a season, just been a little unfortunate. Yeah. But when you're bottom of the league, that is a very different matter. So I do think, there are going to be two sides entering in very different frames of mind. And I think that, the WSL team could have an advantage in that regard. And it could be a very difficult game for whichever team ends up. I think especially if it is someone like a Leicester, not to be harsh, but that Leicester squad isn't far from a WSL2 team in terms of quality. Now, you look at Liverpool and someone like a Beta Olsen should run right against any WSL2 team. They shouldn't have any issues there. But there are some teams in this league that perhaps would struggle in that position. So it's definitely not a given that no one would go down. Alex asks, which team is your relegation favourite at the moment? Either West Ham or Leicester for me. I think despite Liverpool's poor position, I just think the way Leicester are playing and the recruitment they've done is very negative. And I just think if Liverpool and West Ham get their acts together and Everton keep Kelly Gargo, they'll probably all be all right. At West Ham, I've got no idea where they're going to sit. They look really poor in their first game, but if Guarino can get them into gear, I think they've got the quality, especially that front three, to be absolutely fine. So we'll see how it goes, but they'd be my favourites. What about you?
Yeah, I would say West Ham, potentially Everton, if Brian Sorensen just doesn't play Kelly Gargo. That might be, he just decides to not do that like he did this weekend and made it. But yeah, for me, I think it will end up being, of course, Liverpool and Leicester will still be in that conversation, but I'd say West Ham or Everton right now.
I don't know if Liverpool will even be in the conversation.
No, they will.
2 wins and they're suddenly on 10 points. That puts them into that. Suddenly, they could be in the midfield battle. So yes, I know that's a lot to say when they've not won a game yet this season. That they're suddenly going to win 2 matches, and yes, they have got a tough next 4 games of Tottenham, Manchester United, Aston Villa, and Chelsea, and that doesn't help matters.
No.
But I could see them nicking a point in there, or at least maybe getting their first win of the season. I definitely don't think that I think they can beat a Tottenham or a Villa on their day. So then that's out of the question, but. That is a tough run, but I think a couple wins and suddenly it's a very different matter. And I just don't see anyone like a Leicester or a West Ham or Everton going on that kind of run. So I think Liverpool can push themselves out of that relegation fight. Kevin saying Sangari and Lowry bright spots for London City. Yeah, I mean, they're good players. That's the thing with London City. If you give them opportunities, they're probably going to take them, as we've seen this season. They're good individuals. It's not a good team, though. It's not been constructed with a specific philosophy in mind. It's just a lot of footballers who are high reputation, high value, and who they're paying a hell of a lot of money, and they haven't performed well enough yet this season. Let's get on then to our next game, which is, of course, the game at the Joey Stadium. Manchester City 2, 0 Everton. Not vintage dominance, really, from Manchester City in terms of the scoreline. We've been seeing them win games by 6 and 5 and 4 goals this season. This is only a 2-0 win, but we'll start with the visitors. Everton, plagued by the same issues as usual, really.
Yeah, again, Everton have caused themselves so many issues this season. Brian Sorensen has two major problems with what he's trying to do. One of them is he keeps trying to play out of the back when he hasn't got the players with enough quality to do it. And the other one is he keeps playing players in completely random positions. I'm still convinced he uses a wheel of names or something because it's bizarre. This game was a bit better, but there's been other fixtures where we've seen some players all over the place. But Everton, again, it just feels like by playing this way, every game they go into, they are kind of, they're shooting themselves in the foot. They might as well start 1-0 down in some of these games. It was one of those where City didn't dominate by scoreline, but this was probably the most cut and dry fixture. Out of, obviously Chelsea West Ham was probably the most, but yeah, again, this was a very simple game. City went on to do their thing, a little bit of controversy here and there, but even if that, even without that, I still think City would have won. But Everton, again, miles off it. They're not good enough to play possession football. The quicker Brian Johnson realises that, the quicker that they're going to be able to stay up. So if they keep playing this way, they are just going to keep losing fixture after fixture.
Yeah, I mean, Everton had a tough start to last season. They're bottom of the league and barely any points, but they had a huge January that sort of turned things round. I think they could probably do with one again, which isn't a good sign. They spent a lot of money in the summer. They, rebuilt Goodison Park, or sort of refurbished Goodison Park for what they wanted. They brought in Ruby Mace, which is a huge marquee sign, and they brought in some experienced players like Pacheco. They spent a lot of money. They brought in a lot of players. Vignola, another one who came in. And that opening day against Liverpool was deceivably good from Everton. But I wonder how much of a swing that game has been. If Liverpool had won that, which, based on the merit of their performances, they probably should have, we'd probably be looking at them now, because I think they would have taken confidence from that. It's difficult to say, and obviously with the benefit of hindsight, but they would have taken confidence from that into the Leicester game, possibly could have won both of those. And suddenly they're on 10 points, and we're having the conversation flips. We're talking about Everton being in this terrible position with, barely any points season, and Liverpool in a very different spot. So that game has really swung opinion quite quickly. But I do think Everton have been really difficult to watch. As Phil says in the live chat, Everton have been the most frustrating team for me this season. Want them to do well, but they're such a tough watch. Yeah, they are really difficult to watch because their build-up structure is just nonsensical. There's so much space. There's too many gaps between the players. I think Guardiola put it best with his football philosophy, saying that with passes over short distances, it's very difficult to lose the ball. But when you're making those passes, there's always a little bit more risk. And the problem for Everton is every pass is a long pass. Yeah. No one's anywhere near each other in build-up. And so for a side like Man City, who can press with intensity, who can press with aggression and urgency, they did just keep winning the ball back time and time again. When you're going up against a midfield with Yui Hasegawa in it, you've got to be so good on the ball to get away with it. And they weren't. They were really poor. Playing out from the back, I thought the second goal as well was particularly bad defensively. Yeah. How on earth that ball was just sort of flicked in behind from Shaw, and everyone just went, oh well, as meanwhile ran in and just scored. Everton had survived a sort of this onrushing of attacks. Yeah. City kept barraging them, and they missed so many chances, City. Yeah. Everton should have capitalised, but they were weak on both the goals they conceded, and they got absolutely punished for that. City, dominant, but they did get a little fortunate. Yeah, it was uncharacteristic to see City miss so many opportunities on another day. This really could have been a bit of a drubbing, but yeah, they were really, really poor in front of goal. The two goals they had were, again, I don't think either goal was particularly great, and it felt a bit of a one of those weird scenarios where they scored the chances that there shouldn't have really been opportunities, and then the goals, the glaringly obvious chances were put well wide on, absolute sitters. Khadija Shaw was on a mission to see how many big chances she could miss in this game. Just
couldn't seem to have that finishing touch. We had so many efforts that really she should have found the back of the net. Brosnan made some very, very good saves across both halves, and that obviously does make a difference. But yeah, City were uncharacteristically wasteful. They should have done a lot better on another day against a better Everton side. Maybe they would have been punished for it, but luckily for them, Everton really didn't hurt them at all. But City, a 2-0 win is still a good win, but it could have been a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, City have very much got into this season with the sort of we're going to score one more than you mindset. We saw that most blatantly shown in the game against Arsenal, where they quite literally did that. They kept scoring, conceding, and then they scored the winner, and that was it. But I think when they are having these sorts of games, they've done well to prove that they can not play at their highest level and still get the 3 points. But when they are having these kind of games where they aren't taking those opportunities, you do have to question, when they play against some other opposition later in this season, could we see them come into difficulty? They play Chelsea in a few weeks. They play Arsenal, I think, the week after that as well, or it might be the other way around. I can't remember exactly. But they play both of those in quick succession. They're going to be really important games. And if City aren't taking all of the opportunities, because they won't get the chance to take 32 shots, they won't be allowed 9 big chances.
Oh my days.
And 4.27 XG. And so if they're underperforming by such a degree, you do have to worry that, could that be a concern in those kind of games? I think they'll be fine. They've been really good this season. But they did ride their luck at moments in this game. I think that Everton goal, we could discuss that now. Should that Everton goal have stood? I'll give my opinion as a normal person, then you can let us know as a referee.
I'm a normal person.
No, you like to what you like to do at the weekend is go around with a whistle and get abused. So I think that's debatable. But I think with Mace's movement, she doesn't make a move into Yamashita that is significant enough for me that Yamashita goes down the way she does. And I think it's really weak goalkeeping to be stood behind Mace. Because yes, Mace is in Yamashita's path, but Yamashita runs into her. And if City wanted to prevent that and protect their goalkeeper, just put someone in front of Mace, but they didn't. And I think they should have been punished for that. And I thought it was really fortunate that they didn't allow the Everton goal, because I think it was a really harsh decision. Mace doesn't... I know, obviously Mace is in that position to try and disrupt the goalkeeper, but it's not like she grabs her and throws her on the floor and then the ball goes in the net. Yamashita stood behind her, runs into her to try and get the ball and falls over. I really don't think that's a foul, in my opinion. And I don't think it would change the result of the game. I think City would have kicked on. I think if they were in a position where they needed to score some goals, they probably would have done that in the second half. But I do think it was a little bit of a poor decision from the referee. I don't think there was enough contact in it for me. I'm keen to hear your thoughts, though, because you tend to always side with the referees. You're like the Dermot Gallagher of women's football. So let us know. What did you think?
It's a really difficult one, because I think that there is a moment where Mace does back into her, but I don't think that it doesn't come when the ball comes in. When Yamashita actually challenges for the ball, she's under a bit of pressure, but she's not under enough to just pat it down. She still should do better. I think that it's one of those where now, with a couple years ago when we didn't have VAR and we didn't have things like that, that's a good decision. But now, with the whole rules around, corners on pushing and shoving at corners and surrounding goalkeepers, I think it was always going to be given. I think Everton are unlucky. I'll be honest. I do think Everton are unlucky. Yamashita should do better. That's got to be a bit stronger goalkeeping there. And someone in a Man City shirt has got to get in between them. I mean, how basic is that? So I do think City were a bit fortunate on that one. Mace is aggressive, and I think in a world where there's this goalkeeper kind of protection bubble at corners, which is really weird, because then outfield players can do what they want to each other. So I find that a really, that oxymoron, a strange, place in the rules. But yeah, in a world where goalkeepers get protection around corners, I think it was always going to be given, no matter who the teams were or what end it was at.
Yeah, I think Yamashita, if she had her thought on it, probably said that goal should stand till I collapse. And I think it was interesting to see. She just seemed to lose yourself, and I think that didn't really work out for Yamashita. Alex saying Slim Shady in City goal. Yes, indeed. I like the new haircut. I like how you didn't pick up on either.
Yeah, I know. I really like it now. Yeah.
I like the name.
I was so confused.
Yamashita. But yes, no, I was trying to get in a couple there. I can't think of any more though. So that's where we'll end that segment. I'm sure that'll come back in the next few weeks. But City's still in a good spot in the table. Some big games coming up. They're going to be important to how we evaluate, where they are in terms of can they win it this season. That'll be the big question. And they're in a really good position though. There was a question that I've asked about Sam Coffey. It hasn't been announced yet, but as I was asking Jack, do you think City with Yui and Sam Pivot is unbeatable? I don't think it's unbeatable, but I do think it makes them very strong. I think it's a very good signing.
Yep.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that midfield changes, because it will become a slightly different dynamic to that midfield. I'll discuss that in more detail. We'll go with Sam Coffey profile out soon, so look out for that. Let's get into our next game then, which is, of course, the game in the mid-table. Aston Villa 2-1 Brighton. This was sort of Aston Villa getting, what's the opposite of a taste of your own medicine? A taste of your own, a taste of happiness when you've been hurt by that same thing. Because what we've seen so far this season was Aston Villa drop a lot of points in games where they were so dominant. And this felt like the complete antithesis, because Brighton were excellent in this game. They created a lot more chances, they had a bit more of the ball than Aston Villa. And Aston Villa won this through just a passage where they had two opportunities in 2 minutes or something like that, which they took, and that completely spun the game around. And I just thought it was very interesting to see the same thing that sort of plagued Villa throughout the season has come to their aid in this game.
Yeah, exactly that. It was I think the Royal will be very happy with their side. They won a game that potentially could have gone either way. I don't think the Hansen goal was absolutely brilliant, but the first two goals really should have been prevented by both sides. And Brighton, once again, they find themselves on the wrong end of the result when they were probably the better sides, and that seems to be the theme under Vidicic. We always know these games will be close. These two sides, the fixtures, the results between these two have gone either way, have swung, in both favours across the last couple of years. So you can never really call it again another close game. And as you say, just 2 minutes of madness in the second half completely flipped the fixture on its head, and suddenly I don't think Brighton really knew what to do with themselves after that. They were a bit stunned and never kind of really woke up from it. But credit to Aston Villa, they did well. They took their chances. They rode their luck a bit. Rachel Daly kept playing 1-2, playing one bounce off the crossbar and off the post. But yeah, I thought Brighton probably should have won the game, but as I said, I really don't think after that Villa double, I really don't think Brighton, came out and looked like pulling it back.
No, I think yeah, they didn't do enough to respond to that. I think they're a bit shell shocked by those two opportunities for Aston Villa, especially the strike from Hansen. But they were punished for their wastefulness in the first half. They had an early opportunity that Madison Haley didn't take, just completely missed the ball. That's inexcusable when you're in my aerial fantasy team. You've got to be scoring that opportunity. Point blank range, should have been a goal. Sonoda did really well to take her goal in her first WSL start. Pounced really well on some really sloppy build up from Villa, unexpectedly so, but really poor pass from D'Angelo. Sonoda was quick on the scene. And Brighton's never killed the game off. They had the chance in the first half to do so. They never took them. And it just allowed this opportunity, this growing feeling that Villa might get back into the game. And then they got that free kick, and if Brighton really should have dealt with it better. I didn't think it was a great ball from Kendall in towards the front post. Someone should have challenged for it, but Daly won the header really well and nodded it home. And Brighton should have done a lot better defending that. The Hansen strike, Hansen has a lot of time to take it. It's a really great strike, to be fair, but someone's got to close her down quicker. So yeah, Villa jumping ahead of Brighton in the table. Brighton slipping down to 8th in the league. Not the weekend they would have wanted. But yeah, much better from Aston Villa, claiming a result in a game where, again, as we said this season, they've had an issue with claiming, with getting the results, especially performance where they deserve it. This is a game where you've sort of done the opposite. We've seen the Brighton side who, while they played well, were there for the taking, and Villa have absolutely taken advantage of that. But this is a 3 points that's really important for them at this stage of the season.
Exactly that. This feels like more of a momentum builder for Villa. They can really use this to kick on and look to have a good 2026. And if they do, then who knows where they can find themselves up. Now into the top half, can they keep trying to push on and catch the top 5? Maybe so. We know they've got the quality, and we know they're a very, very good defensive unit. And if Hansen and Daly can keep banging in the goals, maybe assisted by a couple others if they want to start stepping up, then they could end the season in a very, very high position after what was a bit of a slow start. But we always know Villa have got the quality. I think Roy is a top manager. It would be really nice to see it come to fruition. But yeah, as I said, this feels like a momentum builder, something they can really use to kick on and keep the good form going.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see if they can keep it going. Villa, a bit of a tough run, I think. Coming up, FA Cup game against Arsenal isn't kind. They've then got Manchester United in the league. It gets a little easier in Feb with Everton and Liverpool, but then they do end off the month with Tottenham and then kick off March with Man City. So a little bit of a difficult run. Some games there they should be quite comfortable in, some games which will be a bit difficult. But yeah, they're having a decent season. I think there will be that belief that Aston Villa can get top half. I think they're comfortably better than London City. I think it will be close between them and Brighton, as proven in both their matchups this season. Yeah. I think, was it a draw in the opening day between these two sides and Villa edging this one? So they've been incredibly well matched in the games between the two. And I think a draw would have been a fair result here. So they're very close sides. I think it could be either one of them finishing 7th or 8th. If I had to predict it, I would say though, 6th or 7th. I had to predict. I do think Villa will just about edge them out, and I think it's because they can get results like this. I think they've got those players in attacking areas. I do think Ola Edson, though, great signing for Brighton. If she can come in and make the difference, that's going to be huge. If they sign a striker as well, that solves their issues, because suddenly they start scoring a lot more goals, and that can fire them, I think, really up the league. And there are teams in there that, yes, the gap is decently big between them and Arsenal and United, but if they really got to run a form together, I think those established teams would have to be a little bit concerned. And Tottenham as well. I mean, Tottenham done incredibly well this season, but the question will be, is it sustainable, especially when we get to the Asian Cup and they lose both their centre-halves and we see just Molly Bartrip there? That's going to be really difficult. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think Villa are in a decent position now, and they'll be looking to kick on and sort of confirm that they can finish in the top half of the table. Let's get on then to our final game. And speaking of Tottenham, it wasn't a performance or a game to write home about, but it was a victory. Tottenham 1-0 Leicester City. Not perfect from Tottenham. Wasteful in front of goal. 5 big chances missed in this game, just 16% shot accuracy. Something we haven't said much of Tottenham this season has been wasteful, but no Katinka Tandberg in the side, adjusting perhaps to a couple new additions. Vinberg in an unfamiliar role, Gautset making her debut. This really should have been more comfortable for Tottenham against a really lacklustre Leicester side. Yeah,
it should have been. As you say, I think that it's understandable. England coming back in and the three behind her being shuffled around a bit to suit for Gautset, who's only just come into the league. So I think that it's understandable. I'm surprised at the amount of chances that were missed, though. Yes, one did fall to Claire Hunt and one did fall to Toko Koga, so I suppose you could, that does level it out a little bit, but at the end of the day, they are professional footballers, especially the Koga one. I still have no idea how it was closer to going out for a throw than it was going in the goal. But yeah, Tottenham will be disappointed. They feel like they should have kicked on, and it wasn't brilliant, but I think it will click once they get used to playing with each other. We know the quality that Gautset has got, and then you start throwing it. Hermano obviously came on and looked bright, but yeah, Tottenham have got a lot of quality. This was an uncharacteristically poor performance in front of goal. They were saved by something that usually happens to them, and they would have lost this game 1-0, which is an Ash Neville own goal. But yeah, I thought that it was one of those where they'll take the 3 points. Martin Ho was probably laughing. Rick Passwell probably wants to hand back his receipt on the Ash Neville transfer. And yeah, I think it's a big 3 points for Tottenham. These are the kind of results you have to get when you're challenging for Europe. When you're not at your best, you still find a way to get the result across the line, and that's exactly what they did in this one.
Yeah, Ash Neville debut for her new club, coming against her former side. She never changes. Front post, doesn't deal with it, heads it in her own net. And I do think Clark should have been a lot more assertive, should have called that, should have come out and claimed it. But it's just heading it in her own net. It's not a great first impression to make. Phil saying brutal situation for Neville on her debut. But this is what you expect. She has some really good moments, but there is always a mistake in her. And, without this, maybe Leicester get a draw against some really difficult opposition. So it's tough, but she shouldn't have headed it in her own net. I think it's hard to say it like that, but just don't head it in your own net. It's probably the first thing you should think on your debut.
Yeah, I think it's an awkward one, of course, for her joining a new club, and immediately her first game is against her former side. I thought that the camaraderie and everything around it after the game, especially, was really, really surprising. And if I was Leicester, I understand she's a Tottenham legend, but if I was Leicester or Rick Passmore, I'd be absolutely furious after the game. Getting a picture with the whole Tottenham squad, getting a picture with the Tottenham fans. I'm thinking, you've just scored an own goal to lose us the game 1-0. I understand she's a club legend and all that, but you've walked in, scored an own goal, and now you're smiling and having fun with them.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because, yes, I can see why they may feel like that, but I also think she was there 10 years, I want to say.
And she was there a week ago. So that's, I know it's difficult.
She's played. She never really got that send off of being there for such a long period of time.
Yeah,
she's been with them. I think when they were in the Championship up into coming into the WSL, she stuck with them for such a long period of time, probably longer than they should have kept her, to be frank. But she's been there for a while. She wanted that sort of send off, and I think this was a nice moment to get that. Arguably, she shouldn't have maybe she shouldn't have played this game. Would that be the situation? Instead, she sort of gets that opportunity to say goodbye to the players and then becomes a Leicester player after this game. Maybe that would have been a better way of going about it. But yeah, I mean, is it any surprise that it went the way it did?
I know. I'd be all right with it if she hadn't scored an own goal and Leicester hadn't lost by only one. It just feels like, obviously, I know football games are 90 minutes and they aren't decided by that one moment. But when you are the sole reason that your side, it's of course it's complete accidental and all that, but it's so weird just the whole way it played out. Tottenham win 1-0 and Ash never happens to be the one who heads it home for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it just shows really why Tottenham have let her go. I know a lot of Tottenham fans were sad, but that is the exact reason, because in this game that would have been the other way around and Tottenham would have lost this game 1-0 potentially. So it's exactly why Martin Ho and the side decided that she shouldn't be part of the squad anymore.
Yeah, Phil says Neville could have had such a different career if she joined a big club when young. The potential was really big with her. I don't necessarily disagree. I think that was an era of women's football that we weren't about. We didn't watch it for. But I think with Neville, she's a player very similar to a lot of players we've seen leave the league or retire in recent years, who comes from the generation before. And I think that women's football was just exploded so quickly, and the level has risen so quickly, and there have been players that have sort of been bypassed in that, and I just don't think she's at the technical level, and I think she makes too many mistakes to play for a WSL, to play in the WSL. But yeah, I think she's had decent performances from Tottenham, even considering the fact they are playing a system that is very possession heavy. But there's a reason they wanted to get move her on. They brought in Hannah Veek. They're using Rybrink in that role for now. It is that transitional period, moving towards a side who do play a very different style of football. If Leicester are to go down, I think they've recruited very well for that. And I do think that when you look at the signings they've made, is there one eye on the fact they could be in the second tier next season? Potentially. I don't think the recruitment they've made this January has been that of, look at this really ambitious side. And I know there's not much money there, and that does give a bit of a constraint to what is possible. But it's very much Passmore signing players who are WSL experienced, players he's perhaps a bit familiar with, and hoping that they can either stay in the league or at least give a good account of themselves. I think either way, with the lack of resources, with the upheaval they've had this season, they've done well. 9 points isn't bad. A couple more points and wins here and there, and that may be that may well be enough for them to stay in the division. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult. I don't think they've made any inspired deals just yet. I think Neville and Mayling do bring experience to the back line. I think Mayling's a really nice signing. But, I think Rachel Williams is just such she's not a WSL level player. I don't think she makes that Leicester. I don't think it gives Leicester anything they didn't have already. I thought Noemi Mouchon looked much sharper than any of their other attackers when she came on. And I think that she'll be a huge part if they are to survive. So yeah, I think, I know they haven't got lots to work with, but as Phil says in chat, I agree, Leicester are in full survival mode. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Tottenham very much is on their fourth now in the division. They are level on points with Arsenal. Is there any chance they get European football? I think it's a very realistic possibility that in a couple weeks we're speaking about them being in the Champions League spots. They play Liverpool and West Ham, while Arsenal go and play Chelsea and Manchester City. The City game is after that, but they play Chelsea or Liverpool play West Ham. They probably won't have a game the weekend that Tottenham get to play West Ham, and then Sorry, yes. I've phrased that horribly.
Yeah.
But Tottenham play Liverpool and then West Ham. Arsenal play Chelsea this weekend, then no game that weekend after. There's a very realistic possibility that in 2 shows' time, we're talking about Tottenham being in the Champions League spots. Maybe we'll see a Taylor, the Taylor Liverpool comeback will happen in that Tottenham game, which would be an unfortunate timing for the Spurs. But they're in a position now where it's very realistic they could get Champions League football, at least be in the European spots. Going into February.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. I think we've got to talk about them in that conversation. We've also got to talk about them in contention for the FA Cup. I mean, who have they got in? I can't remember who they've got this coming weekend.
Leicester City.
Leicester again.
Neville gets to come back again.
Here we go.
Another farewell.
It's like extra time or penalties.
I think she's then going to sign for Liverpool and then West Ham, and Tottenham are just going to keep getting opportunities.
Ash Neville has managed to sign for the one club that Tottenham played back to back after the winter break. You just can't write it, can you? But yeah, Tottenham, they're in real contention now for European football. You think once players like Gautset start to click, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. They really are.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex says don't count Spurs out over the Gunners and United. I wouldn't. I mean, I think the problem for Tottenham is still that ability to beat the big teams. When you look at their record this season, they should have beaten Manchester United.
Yeah.
They didn't. If they'd won that, they would now be third.
Yeah.
They did beat Aston Villa, but they drew with Arsenal. They lost to London City, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, but I don't count that. Everyone's lost.
But again, there's 2 results where you go, if they'd beaten London City, which they should have done, because the teams above them in the table have, and they'd beaten United, a game they really should have won, they'd be ahead of Chelsea. And that's been ridiculous that it comes down to those kind of games, because they have done very well this season. The big losses, though, were, of course, that 5-1 to Man City. They did only lose 1-0 to Chelsea, to be fair. But they haven't got results against the top teams. That will be the concern now for Tottenham, is can they sort of breach that gap? And that would be the reason I wouldn't put them in any serious consideration, because obviously they locked out the League Cup, lost to Manchester United in the quarter-final stage. The FA Cup, yes, they'll probably get through Leicester. Yes, they may well get through whoever they play in the round after that. But if they're getting towards the quarter-final and semi-final stage, and those big teams haven't taken each other out or anything like that, it'll be very difficult to picture Tottenham getting deep in the competition. Obviously, they got to the final a couple of years ago, but got to bear in mind that they played Leicester in the semis. It's a constant theme today. But that was a big game at the time, and I think it was a Martha Thomas goal in the semi-final. We're talking about
times.
It went deep, didn't it?
Yeah,
because it ran into, because the terrible scheduling, it ran into Chelsea Man United, and we ended up not just watching the first 10 minutes of United, which was when they scored 2 goals. And Tottenham got a great run. If they get a run like that, absolutely they can get to the final, but it will be difficult.
I mean, I'm more stunned at the game that happened on Sunday 2 years ago with an FA Cup semi-final. How the 2 sides have come since then. That was Leicester under an interim manager, and obviously Tottenham under Villaharm when he actually decided to play people. But wow, incredible how football moves on in a couple of years. But yeah, Tottenham, I think they could definitely be at that stage once again, as you say. It's, FA Cup, knockout competitions are luck of the draw at the end of the day.
They took someone like an Arsenal or a City. I think they took City out.
City out on penalties. Because Becky Spencer was incredible in that game.
Yeah, and they got rid of her.
And then
immediately. No, she didn't play the rest of the competition. But yeah, I think Tottenham have taken a massive step up this season. It's not outrageous. I think they could be competing in some sort of Europe in the not too distant future. Right, that rounds up all the games. Shall we talk about aerial fantasy?
Oh, we can do.
Awesome. That is what I want to do, because I finally had a good game week. Do we have any graphics?
No, we don't.
We don't. Well, you just have to listen really intensely then, guys. This week, or go to the league and scroll down to. You're up there now, but you have to scroll down to 118th to find me. I did look through though. I thought I was like last, but there are 371 people.
That's pretty
in the league. So if you're below me, unlucky, because I've not had a good year and I'm still not doing too badly. I'm going to start though, because you're boring. Free transfer obviously over the winter break. Made a lot of signings. I focused on visionaries. I had Haley, who was visionary. She decided to miss an open goal. I had Gautset, who was visionary. I don't think she was visionary actually this week, but brought her in because only 1% of people had her. She decided not to do anything. Lauren James, though, was the big differentiator for me. Visionary pick. She got 10 points for the team. Lovely stuff. Rebecca Knack, also visionary. That's outrageous. How was that allowed to happen? But she got me 9 points. I got 6 from Hampton, 6 from Gurma, 6 from Koga as well. Nice little backline there. Lauren Ham got me 5, no contribution, but she did get bonus points after the game. 2 from Capox, 2 from Seiko. I had Olsen in my team. I took her out for Capox because Olsen was obviously, we heard before the game she wasn't going to be there. Seiko 2 points, and then 10 from my captain, Khadija Shaw. Annoyingly, I benched Sandberg on 6, benched Falk on 6, but that's okay because I had Hampson starting. So, yeah, not too bad. very happy with that 61 points. And it does now take me up to 118th in the Women's Football Chat League and 2,288th in the overall league, which is a little bit better than I was before.
That's quite good. So I am now 12th in the Women's Football Chat League. 56,
outrageous, isn't it? I might just delete the league.
56th in the overall league, which I'm very happy with. 82 points this week. I did use the wall. Now, I messed up slightly because I didn't play a back 5. Oh, I did in the end because the players that got subbed in and I didn't actually captain one of my defenders. So that was a bit of an oversight, just because I thought Shaw would score more than those defenders anyway.
The wall was the right thing to do this week, but you executed it horribly and got away with it, and that annoys me. Because, like, you had us meet at Ale getting subbed into it.
I did, because I started for Gino and Olsen, because, like you, I didn't check my team after the pressers, and I had 2 injured players. But anyway, let's go through the team. Kopp, Koga, Carpenter, Kasparai, and Fox all keeping clean sheets. So, Kopp 10, Koga 10, Fox 10, Carpenter and Kasparai both got assists as well. So 13 for Carpenter, 13 for Kasparai. You mentioned Ale getting subbed in there for 2. I also had Gory subbed in 1, Kirby 2, bit disappointed by that, thought she could have got more. Olivia Holt got me 4. How did she do that? She got a clean, not sure how she got 4, but she got, I'll take that, 4 points.
She got 4 points for?
I'm not really sure. She got 1 for playing, 1 for 6 minutes, and 1 for a clean sheet. I don't know where the 4's come from, but never mind.
It's been a bonus?
Maybe, I'm not complaining. 7 for Kirsty Hansen for that wonder strike she scored against Brighton, and then Captain Shaw with 10. So yeah, 82 points. As I say, into the closing in the top 10 now in the Women's Football Chat League.
Yeah.
Nearly into the top 50 in the overall league.
What tactics have you got left to play?
What tactics have I got? I've got bench boost and triple captain.
I've used both of those, and I've got the wall left. I don't know how I'm below you having used 2 of my tactics. It's gone horribly wrong for me.
So I went into the winter break in a brilliant position, having not used any of my chips so far this season. So yeah.
I think I'm going to save the wall for when there is a double, which could happen if Arsenal-Leicester gets moved to a week that isn't the midweek after the Champions Cup final. So then we'll see what happens on that one. But I'm very much looking forward to capturing Khadija Shaw against London City. I think she might score 8.
I might triple captain her.
You could.
I might
you could wait until she doubles, or you could just triple captain her. We'll see what happens
do that.
on that one. But yeah, no, I'm happy with how my team's looking. I've planned ahead a little bit with my picks now, so I'm not in too bad a position. I brought in Olivia McLaughlin from Leicester because they play West Ham. Well, I had her last week on the bench, but she plays. Obviously, she's a defender, but she plays midfield and she's visionary. So I think maybe that could be a nice little 20-point haul if she fancies it. If Olivia McLaughlin is watching, if you could not let West Ham score and get a goal and assist,
I've been just ripped into her team for losing to Tottenham.
Yeah. Yeah, if you could do all that, that would be great. That, though, is everything from us today. I hope you have enjoyed the show. If you have, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to subscribe as well to the channel for more. We'll be back tomorrow with the Women's Football Transfer Show. We've had that the last 2 weeks, obviously, with no weekend roundups. That will be moving to Tuesday. Next week will be Monday again. The week after it will be Tuesday again. And the week after that will be Tuesday again because of the transfer deadline day. We'll be live on deadline day. So we've got a lot of streams coming up. Look out for those. Also got a lot of FA Cup games coming up over this weekend. Thursday, Friday and Sunday we are live for FA Cup action. It's West Brom Everton on Thursday. It's West Ham versus Newcastle on Friday. And then on Sunday, Arsenal taking on Aston Villa. Should be some great FA Cup action. And that, though, is everything. Thank you guys very much for watching and we'll see you next time.